Today, we're going to unpack a massive $500 million bet that could genuinely reshape the future of flying. There's a huge new energy deal that's just been signed in Egypt, and, it's a really bold move to try and become a major player in the world's shift to green energy. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the numbers, because they're pretty staggering, and they really tell the story of just how ambitious this whole thing is.
First up, $500 million. That's not a small number. That's the initial cash that Egypt and its Qatari partners are putting on the table to build this brand new, state-of-the-art energy hub.
And what's that money going to produce? Well, 600,000 tons. That's the target every single year for a very special kind of green fuel once this place is up and running at full capacity.
Okay, and then there's this number. $15 billion. That's what they're projecting this one single project will be worth in exports over just the next 10 years. I mean, that really shows you the kind of economic powerhouse they're trying to build here.
So what's the common thread tying all these massive numbers together? Well, it's a huge deal to build a production hub for something called Sustainable Aviation Fuel, or SAF for short. And it's being built in a super strategic spot, the Suez Canal Economic Zone. They're not going it alone either. They've already roped in an energy giant, Shell, as a key partner and, crucially, a buyer.
Okay, so that brings up a couple of big questions, right? What exactly is this SAF stuff, and why is a company like Shell putting its weight behind a $500 million bet on it right now?
Well, to put it simply, SAF is basically a renewable fuel that's designed to be a drop-in replacement for the regular old jet fuel we use today. And that's the magic word, drop-in. It means you can literally pour it into existing airplanes and use the same airport pipelines. No need to redesign the entire fleet or rebuild all our airports. That's a huge, huge advantage.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Your standard jet fuel? That comes from crude oil, a fossil fuel. But SAF, well, it can be made from all sorts of things. We're talking used cooking oil, leftover crops, and all kinds of other biomass and waste. It's basically turning our leftovers into travel fuel.
And this is exactly why it's so important right now. Think about it. For an industry like aviation, electrifying long-haul flights with batteries is, well, it's not happening anytime soon. Same with hydrogen. So if you want to cut emissions from flying in the next decade or two, SAF is pretty much the only game in town. It's the most practical path forward.
Okay, so this massive investment might look like it just dropped out of the sky. But is this Egypt's first rodeo when it comes to biofuels? Do they have any experience in this space? Well, the answer's a bit more complicated than a simple yes or no. See, while this SAF project is brand new, Egypt has actually been in the related biodiesel market for years. And here's where the plot thickens. If you look at the data, after hitting a pretty big peak back in 2021, Egypt's biodiesel exports have actually been in a nosedive for 3 years straight. And it's not just exports, production has stalled out too. So this history, it adds this really interesting layer of tension, doesn't it? This massive new SAF project isn't just some optimistic expansion. No, it's being launched right as their other biofuel market is struggling. It tells you this is a calculated, high-stakes gamble. They're trying to pivot hard away from something that hasn't been working and into something they hope will be the future.
So that begs the question, right? Why go all in now, especially with that shaky track record? What's different this time? What makes them so sure this bet will pay off? Well, the answer isn't really inside Egypt. It's about looking at the bigger global picture. See, this deal is timed almost perfectly to catch a massive wave of change in global energy policy. Everyone is scrambling for energy security, and that's creating this huge, predictable demand that wasn't there before. The pressure is absolutely on. The UK just started its SAF mandate this year. The EU is rolling out some really aggressive rules for both planes and ships, basically forcing them to use more and more of this stuff every single year. So this isn't some wishful thinking about future demand. This is the law. The demand is literally being legislated into existence. So what you've got is this kind of perfect storm. You have governments creating guaranteed customers through laws. You have a global push to become less dependent on traditional oil and gas. And on top of that, there's a huge need for biofuels that are certified and for sure are legitimate, not fraudulent. And a big modern hub like the one they're building, it's perfectly designed to solve all three of those problems at once.
And that global context, that's precisely why this deal in Egypt is so much more than just a new factory for jet fuel. This is about them seizing this exact moment in history to build something way, way bigger. Yeah, forget the idea of just one standalone factory. This SAF project is really a cornerstone piece in a much bigger, much more ambitious puzzle they're putting together in the Suez Canal economic zone.
What they're doing is stacking green technologies. This SAF hub isn't going to be on its own. It's designed to work right alongside other massive projects for things like green hydrogen and green methanol. It's like they're building a whole clean energy ecosystem, where the waste from one process might become the fuel for another, all of it powered by the sun and wind they have in abundance.
And the grand vision here? It's to use their location, one of the most strategic shipping crossroads on the planet, to become the #1 pit stop for clean fuels for all of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway here? What should we remember?
Really, this whole thing is a story about convergence. It's about how one massive, high-stakes project in one country connects directly to these huge global tidal waves of energy change and the quest for energy security. It's basically Egypt placing a massive bet that they can ride that wave into a completely new economic future.
And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? What we're watching here is a real-time experiment. Is this $500 million bet going to become the blueprint for how other countries can pivot to a green economy? Or is it just a massive gamble that could get crushed by the volatile forces of a market that isn't quite ready? Only time will tell, and you can be sure we'll be watching.